If you've played any platformer games on the phone or some other games, I'm sure you've seen on-screen controls like what you're seeing here. So you would have buttons to move left, to move right, and a button to jump or an action button. You can also have more buttons, of course. At the time of this recording, Phaser doesn't have its own on-screen controls, at least not in the framework itself. There is, though, a premium plugin that you can purchase for, I think, $20 on Phaser.io, but I want to show you in this video how you can implement your own custom on-screen controls. You'll see it's very simple, and it works good enough to be used on a commercial game or any game that you need. So you'll see that it's a good starting point, and you can obviously use it on your projects. You have to make sure that you load images for both buttons. So we already have that, and the images are nothing but rectangles. You could, of course, have images with the arrow or whichever design you want to have. I've noticed that using just plain rectangles with a bit of transparency, which is the alpha property of the sprite, looks pretty okay. So we'll just go with that approach. So we create our player, and I've added this line of code that sets some custom parameters. We will use these to set whether the player is moving to the left or to the right, or if it should jump. And then we'll integrate the code of the on-screen button with the current cursor key behavior. Even if you're not using the keyboard, you might still want to have so that you can move the player with the keyboard, because when you're developing on the computer, sometimes it's really quick to just move the player around with the keyboard. So it might be good for your own usage, even if you're not thinking of having this this game on the web or as a desktop game. So at the end of our create method, I'm going to add in another method called create on-screen controls, and we'll implement that. Now, this lecture will be divided in 2 videos. In this video, I'll show the buttons, and on the next video, we'll implement the actual logic, because otherwise it will be a lesson that's just too long. So, our method is called on-screen controls, and we want to show our sprites. This is, by the way, not shown yet. I had it from before, because I already obviously created the entire game already. So, our sprites, this dot left arrow, and we won't create sprites, we'll create buttons. What's the difference between a sprite and a button? A button can have a callback method, and it can have also other aspects, so that if you click on the button, it looks different. So you can have things like that. But I'm going to treat them as if I'm not going to use that functionality. I'm only using them because it saves me from enabling input on the sprite. I've found that it works better if I do it this way than if I use the functionality of the button, because it's a little bit tricky when you're keeping a button pressed in Phaser. The way I'm going to show you in the next video is how you can do it, and it works perfectly, but it doesn't work the same way if you use the button callback. So we're just using button to have the input enabled, but feel free to look at the documentation for button and maybe change other things, like when you're pressing the button, it looks different or something like that. So the position of the left arrow will be 20, 535, and we will use the asset called arrow button. So there we have the first one. We want also one for the right, and the location of this one will be 110. The location of this one 180. This is the action button, and the sprite is different too. It's the pink one, and they look better if I make them a little bit transparent. So that's left arrow dot alpha. We'll set it to 0.5. Duplicate that line, and right arrow and action button. So now we have our on-screen controls. What will happen next will be to listen for events and to implement that logic with the update logic so that it combines with the keyboard. So to summarize, so far, what we're doing is having on-screen controls. All I've done so far is just putting in the sprites and making them transparent. And what I will do next is listening for events and combining that logic with the update method so that the player actually moves when you press the buttons.